have a rusty transmission line that was starting to leak on this 2005 Honda Pilot. So first thing what we're going to need to do is pull off this front shroud that's on the front here, and this gives us access. So this line broke and started leaking while we were parked, and since it's a low pressure line, we were able to fix it with just this hose clamp and a piece of rubber, and that fixed it just enough to get it home. So you can see this entire line is definitely really rusty and needs to be replaced badly. So we're going to take a look and see if we can put nickel copper on, because nickel copper is corrosion resistant and we won't have the same problem again. I'll spray some PB Blaster on some of these brackets just to make them easier to get off. Get one right there. And there's a bracket holding it on over here, about right there underneath. That one's going to be hard to spray. So you can see that this bolt is definitely in a tight spot here, but we're able to just get a little bit of the PB Blaster fluid on there, and this is going to be easier to break off now. I got the bolt off on this bracket here, and on the clip on this hose here, I was able to grab it and bring it back. But on the clamp up here, these tabs here are just way too thin from being rusted, and this one you can see is just super flimsy. This one here broke off, and this one here already is starting to break off. So this clamp is just too rusted, so we're gonna try to get this off. Here is really rusted. The ears that were here that I'm supposed to be able to grab onto were just so rusted they broke off. And I've been trying to pry it off with pliers, and there's just no way. And I think it'd be easier just to clip off the rubber line here and put new fresh line on, because we're also going to be replacing this brake, this transmission line here. So if we cut it here, you can see we have a little bit of extra rubber on the hose, so it'll just be a new fresh fit. So I'm gonna trim it back a bit here, about right there, but make sure you have a bucket underneath here, because transmission fluid is gonna come out, and we're okay with that because we're actually gonna be doing a transmission fluid flush, so we need to take the fluid out anyway. So let's go ahead and cut it. There we go. So this clamp was in a bit better condition. I was able to grab it and move it out of the way. And now we're just gonna try to pry this hose and break it loose from the pipe here, and then we'll try to pull this off. So now I had to move this clamp back a little bit, and because it was still grabbing on. But now we have it off enough that we can start to slide this off and actually pull it off just like that. So this fluid here, you can tell, is really dirty. If I dab a little bit of this on here, this should be bright red. It has like a black tint to it. This fluid is not what it should be looking like. If we take, this is a bottle of brand new stuff. Didn't mean to pour it on, but you can see that's bright red, and that's what you want it to look like, and you don't want it to be brown like this is. So there's a big difference, and this is the color that it should be, and this is what it looks like whenever it's worn and used. So we want it to be bright red. You can see that plastic clip right in there that's holding the other hose on. Definitely is kind of tricky to get to, and it's hard to hold and pull at the same time. So this piece here isn't really that important. We're just gonna go ahead and clip it with some clippers before we try to damage anything else. It's really hard to get off. So we'll just clip it. And now that should break loose. There we go. So to get this off the rest of the way, there's one more bracket, and it's right in here. It's pretty hard to see, but it's this metal piece right there. So I can't feel a bolt anywhere. I feel down, I feel all around. I'm trying to look in there. I don't see or feel a bolt anywhere. So I might just have to try to break this off. There was a 10mm bolt right around there. It was so tight in there, and it was so rusted over, we just couldn't get to it. It was just gonna be a nightmare trying to get it out. So we just wiggled this back and forth until that bracket broke, just because it was so rusty. But now I'm gonna try to go ahead and take out this line. So this is just gonna take a bunch of maneuvering to try to wiggle it out of its place. because it's kind of woven into a few places, so this is going to take some time. Just little bit by little bit, we're starting to be able to quickle that out. And there we go. It came out, and there's our hose that we just got out. So here's the part out of the car finally, and getting a look at it, you can see we definitely have some major rust spots, and especially right here, because that's where it rusted through and we've lost a lot of our fluid. Now, of course, we'd like to put a new one in, and when I was looking online, I was having a hard time finding this part, but parts that were similar to this one on different parts of the transmission were pretty expensive. They were like 30, 40, 50 bucks, and they were steel. Now, if we could get like 1/4 inch or maybe a little bit bigger of nickel copper line, then we could make this ourselves out of nickel copper, and we wouldn't have to worry about it rusting again, and it would just be corrosion resistant and it would last long. Here's some nickel copper brake line, and I don't know if we can get it this big, but if we could, that would just be great. I think they should make these out of nickel copper from the factory, but especially brake lines. We had actually on this same car, this is the brake line from it, on the last 2 inches, they didn't coat it in plastic, so this steel just rusted through. It actually blew, and brake fluid started hissing out, so that was not a good situation to be put into whenever you start losing your brake fluid as you're driving. So I think nickel copper would have just been much better because this doesn't corrode and it won't rust like that. But we'll take a look online and see what's available. So I was having a really hard time finding this part, and instead of replacing this with steel again, where it's just gonna rust again in the next 100,000 miles, I found some nickel copper brake line. Now I measured this, and the inner diameter, the ID, is 1/4 inch. And when I went and looked online, I found a 25-foot roll of 1/4 inch nickel copper brake line. So normally pipe is measured by the ID, so this should have a 1/4 inch inner diameter. So this should be the same as this, and it'll last much longer. $19 is a really good price for this, especially because it has free shipping and no tax. I've had also really good luck with this company. They're a really good company for lifetime lines. We've ordered brake line from them before, and they just ship it to you fast, and they're one of the cheapest options out there. So we did order 1/4 inch nickel copper. We thought this would have been the correct size, but it wasn't. It was actually 3/8. 3/8 is the correct size for the transmission line, and this worked. So to make our new transmission line, we just got the 3/8 of nickel copper line here. So what I just did here is I matched the shape of the line best I could. I have the bends matching the factory ones. And it helps if you have one of these. What this does is it goes in here. You can take this, and really this helps you bend and get correct bends here where you won't crimp it. I had that happen on this one. Luckily, it was near enough to the end where I could just cut it off, and I didn't have to cut a whole new piece off of the roll. I always leave probably about this much on the end of extra, just in case something like that happens, or it just doesn't want to fit because your bends aren't the same as the factory. Now, on the old one here, there's these little lips here, and that helps grab onto the rubber hose that slides over there. And obviously we can't put those on here, but what we can do is bubble flare it. Bubble flaring is basically the same process as double flaring, except without taking the cone down for the last time. So in order to do that, I'm gonna do it on this end here. It's really easy, especially with nickel copper. So what I'm going to do is find the 3/8 hole, which is right there on the flaring tool. Put this in, get it to the correct height, which is the same thickness as the piece here. It's already at the right height. Convenient. Tighten these. This is something you want to take these as tight as you can, just because you don't want it to slip down. So I felt both of these tighten up. Now we can go ahead and take our 3/8 adapter, put that in, and then put the yoke on. And what we'll do
is put this in place. And if we were doing steel line, I definitely wouldn't be able to do this while I'm holding it in my hand. But since this is nickel copper, it's really easy, and I can actually do it while I'm holding it. It has a little place where you can grab onto it with the vise right there, which is really nice and convenient, but I can just take this down with it in my hand. It's amazing how much softer the nickel copper is. So we'll tighten this down as far as we can. Right there. Take it back out. And there you can see is our bubble flare. Now, if you were going to double flare it, which we don't need to, you would put this on again and then press that down one more time. That's what you do for brake line and other things like that. Now when we loosen this up, we have a nice lip there and a lip on this side. And let's go ahead and try to install this on the car. Now, we weren't gonna go and buy another steel line just like this, though it in 100,000 miles have the same problem. It'll just rust through. Nickel copper, you can get it pretty cheap online. This 25-foot roll was about $30, free shipping. So this is a good option. You'll be able to make a lot of stuff out of this, and it'll last forever.
So one thing that is gonna be different with this is there's no brackets where the bolts are going to hold it in. Now, if we need to, we can zip tie it to a few pieces, but I don't think missing the brackets will be a big deal. So now we're gonna go ahead and just test fit this. It can be a little tricky to figure out how to get it in. It was a little tricky to get it out. If I slide it just like that, then there we go. And now that's in place. This side will slide onto there, and this end will go right into that hose. You can see on this piece that's going into the radiator, it's not corroded at all, which I think this looks like aluminum. At least they didn't make that out of steel. With a new clamp on this hose, we can go ahead and start to slide this on. That feels nice with the homemade lip that we put on there. Slide that in, put the hose clamp over it, and now we'll go ahead and tighten this up. So we've got this one in place. Now on the other side, this clamp, the original clamp, is still intact. It's still in good enough condition, we can still use it. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach this side. So this one's definitely tighter. It's a little tricky to get. We just gotta work it on slowly. So now we're going to try to take this clamp and put it back in place. So now that clamp is in place and over the hose, and now everything should be sealed. Now you can see there is quite a bit of rattle in here. It'll rattle around as the car rattles, so we're just going to secure some things now. So now we can go ahead and just zip tie some things, secure it down, and we also want to make sure this is tight so it's not rattling around. We especially don't want it to be rattling up against another metal part. If that rattles and rattles, it could wear a hole into the actual line itself. So we want to make sure all these are nice and tight and there'll be no rattling. I'm really glad that we didn't have to go through and put another steel line in. It'll just rust again. This looks really nice, and I'm sure it's gonna last much longer than what a steel line would have. So I just ran the engine, got it warm up to its optimal temperature, and now when we check the fluid, it should be right at the top of the first dot. Actually, it's right below. Now, of course, the fluid expands whenever you heat it up, and you can see it's right there. So it's just at the very bottom of that circle. That's where we want it. That's good level for the fluid to be. So we know we don't need to add any more, and we have the correct fluid level.